Okay, in one of our deployment scenario, we have saw that like monitoring, login, and different kind of PVC. So how does Kubernetes handle this monitoring, logging, health check, and persistent storage?
Okay. Before I continue with your question, we have to understand why we use the monitoring service like Prometheus, Grafana. So Prometheus is basically used to get all the data from our application, like how much our application or pods are consuming resources, how our nodes are doing, like all the state, and those state are shared with Grafana, and Grafana is basically a UI that we can run in our browser, and from that we can check all the current status of our pods, of our nodes and everything. And depending on those data we can say like our cluster is good, or we have to increase our cluster size, or we have to include any node or delete some node. Like if sometimes, for example, on our application we deployed 4 nodes, but for our only for the ecom application that is not needed. We can just use 1 nodes and it will be able to deploy the application and it will run smoothly. But we used deployed 4 ones. So from the Grafana monitoring service we would know that there is no need for that much resources for our application or the ecom application. So depending on that, we can just decrease our node number and improve our costing. Like AWS services are quite costly, and so that we have to always keep a eye on the services that we are providing. So we have to keep the expenses as minimum. At minimum, it is one of our role. And what was the second part of your question? Please, would you mind please sharing again?
Sure. So, like how Kubernetes handle those health check, persistent storage, and these things.
Okay, so let's talk about the persistent storage. So on our crash course, I already described that persistent storage, what persistent storage is. So Kubernetes or EKSCTL don't create the persistent volume on its own. We have to mention in the YAML file that what storage class we want to use. We can create a new storage class, or we can use the default one which created during the creation of the cluster. And persistent volume is basically needed to deploy a stateful application. For example, let's say database is a stateful application. We have to store the state. Like if we uninstall any application, the application will be removed with that state as well. But if we remove the database from our cluster, it will remove the data as well. If we thinking about the stateful application. And to prevent that, we use the storage class, and by doing that, if we uninstall the MySQL application, our storage stays the same. Like if we install the application again, it will attach the application to that storage so that we won't lose any data. Also, as you said about healing, we can define in the YAML file that after how much time we will think that our application is successfully deployed. And to do that, we use the liveness probe or readiness probe. So readiness probe will send a request to the application in a specific route, and if the application returns at 200 or okay response, it will think the application is running properly, so everything is working properly. And the readiness probe is for you defining the application is ready or not, and the liveness probe is used to define the application is running or not. So if the Kubernetes checks that the application is not receiving sending data as it should be, then it will just deploy a new application. I mean, it will just create a new pod, or you can say container, and remove the previous one. So it won't just create a new one and keep the previous one as it is, because it will take too much storage from our cluster, and which is costly as well. So it after it make sure the new application is deployed, it will just simply remove the extra one. Also, there are other features like we can maintain how much resources our application going to take, and depending on that we can maintain like a application can't take that much resources. Like for example, let's say it can only take one core and 20 gigabyte of RAM memory. So depending on all of those, it will just create a new deployment if it takes too much resources and deploy delete the previous one. So that way it will always maintain that our application is stays up and it won't face any kind of issue like the cluster lagging or things like that.
Thank you. Nicely described.
Okay, thank you.